about being part of something greater than yourself.
I believed every word that came out of Adam's mouth.
Adam told me I was going to be...
Are they faking it till they make it? The sales guy comes to me and he says, this is some kind of cult.
Japan, they gave Adam Neumann $4 billion and said, go crazy.
It was like flushing cash down the toilet.
Right now, we're in a very high growth stage. You can actually choose when to be profitable.
Wife?
His co-founder was...
In September 2019, Adam Neumann destroyed $37 billion in company value in 6 weeks. His investors stripped him of control. His board forced him out. The IPO he had spent years building was pulled. The company he had taken from a single floor in Lower Manhattan to 111 cities was in free fall. He walked away with $1.7 billion. 3 years later, the most prestigious venture capital firm in Silicon Valley handed him $350 million to do it again. That is not a mistake. That is not a coincidence. That is a system. And understanding that system is the whole story. This is WeWork, and it is not the story you think you know. Section 1. What WeWork actually was. Here is what WeWork actually was. It was a real estate company. It signed long-term commercial leases on office buildings. It subdivided those spaces into smaller units. It rented those units to startups and freelancers at a markup. That is it. That is the whole business. Classic real estate arbitrage, built on borrowed time and borrowed money. But Adam Neumann had a gift that most landlords do not have. He could make a lease sound like a revolution. He did not call it subleasing. He called it elevating the world's consciousness. He told investors, serious, sophisticated investors who should have known better, that WeWork was not in the real estate business. It was in the community business, the technology business, the future of work. That distinction was worth $47 billion. Until it was not. Section 2. The man. Adam Neumann was born in Israel in 1979. He grew up on a kibbutz, a communal settlement where resources are shared, meals are collective, and individual identity is deliberately secondary to the group. He later said that experience shaped everything he built. The kibbutz gave him the template for WeWork: shared space, shared mission, shared identity. What he did not say, what nobody said until it was too late, was that kibbutzes do not charge membership fees. He moved to New York in the early 2000s. By his own admission, he spent much of his early time in the city clubbing, hitting on girls, and trying to get rich. Tried several businesses, failed at most of them. In 2010, he met a designer named Miguel McKelvey. Together, they rented a floor in Lower Manhattan, put in some communal tables, and started subletting desks. The timing was perfect. The 2008 financial crisis had just pushed a generation of workers out of corporate offices. Freelancers, startups, displaced professionals, they all needed flexible, affordable space. WeWork had all of that. It grew fast. By 2014, it had raised $150 million and was valued at $1.5 billion. By 2016, the valuation had hit $16 billion. Then Masayoshi Son arrived. Section 3. The SoftBank moment. Masayoshi Son is the founder of SoftBank, a Japanese conglomerate that made one of the most famous bets in investment history, $20 million into Alibaba in 2000, which became worth $60 billion. That one bet convinced Son of something. He decided that the key to extraordinary returns was not careful analysis. It was betting on extraordinary founders. In 2016, Son met Adam Neumann for 12 minutes. 12 minutes. He wrote a $4.4 billion check. His reasoning was blunt. In times of confusion, go with the crazy ones. By January 2019, SoftBank had poured in billions more, pushing WeWork's valuation to $47 billion. $47 billion. For a real estate company that had never made a profit, that had lost $1.9 billion in 2018 alone. For context on how delusional that number was, WeWork's main traditional competitor, IWG, which ran Regus office spaces, was valued at just $3 billion at the time, 15 times less, for a company doing essentially the same thing. But the story held. The vision held. Neumann held the stage like nobody in the history of commercial real estate had ever held a stage. WeWork was in 111 cities, 500 locations, 500,000 members, and then they filed to go public. Section 4. The culture. Before the S1, you need to understand what was actually happening inside WeWork. Because the culture is not a side story, it is the mechanism that made the whole thing work. Meetings were fueled with tequila shots. Neuman's drink of choice was Don Julio 1942, a $140 a bottle tequila, and employees were warned in advance. If you do not have it ready, he will lose his mind. Company retreats were described by employees as filled with sounds of people having sex. He smoked marijuana on a private jet to Israel. The flight crew found a large chunk stuffed in a cereal box after landing. The plane's owner recalled the aircraft. When he laid off 7% of the company in 2016, he had employees walk into the meeting to tequila shots, brought in Run DMC to perform, and told people to dance while others looked on in disbelief. He threw bottles of Don Julio through the glass walls of his own office during company parties. His spokesperson called it an accident. None of this is incidental. The chaos, the excess, the energy, it was the product. People did not just invest in WeWork. They believed in Adam Neumann the way people believe in a cult leader. The culture was the proof of concept. It said, this man operates on a different plane. Normal rules do not apply here. Apple TV understood this. They made a whole prestige television series about him called We Crashed, with Jared Leto playing Neumann. It aired in 2022, while he was already raising money for his next company. The mythology machine never stopped. Section 5. The S1 that changed everything. In August 2019, WeWork released its IPO prospectus, the legal document designed to convince investors to buy shares. It convinced them to run. Within hours, analysts started reading. And what they found was not a technology company. Neumann had personally bought 4 buildings and leased them back to WeWork, collecting rent from his own company. He had borrowed $380 million against his WeWork shares. He had trademarked the word we and then sold that trademark to his own company for $5.9 million. When investors noticed, he gave the money back. His wife Rebecca had veto power over his successor. The company had a chief heart officer, a chief culture officer. It employed his dog. And the actual financials showed WeWork would need to borrow enormous sums just to stay solvent through 2020. In 6 weeks, the valuation collapsed from $47 billion to $10 billion. The IPO was withdrawn. In October 2019, the board removed Neumann as CEO. His exit package, loans forgiven, shares repurchased, a $185 million consulting fee, totaled $1.7 billion. SoftBank, the firm that had called him a visionary worth betting $4.4 billion on after 12 minutes, eventually wrote off its entire WeWork investment. Total losses, more than $14 billion. Masayoshi Son later called it, publicly, a stain on my life. The man who ran it into the ground walked away with $1.7 billion. The man who funded him lost $14 billion. That asymmetry is the story. Section 6. The death. New management arrived. Sandeep Mathrani, a seasoned real estate executive, cut costs, closed underperforming locations, and laid off thousands. Then COVID hit. Shared office space was the single worst business to be in during a global pandemic that sent every worker home. Demand collapsed. Memberships canceled. Long-term leases became crushing liabilities. In 2021, WeWork went public through a SPAC merger at a $9 billion valuation, down 80% from its peak. It kept falling. Then, in a move that tells you everything you need to know about Adam Neumann, he actually tried to buy WeWork back out of bankruptcy at a discount. The company he had destroyed, he wanted to reacquire for cents on the dollar. A judge blocked it. In November 2023, WeWork filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, $47 billion to zero. 4 years. Section 7. The comeback. By the time WeWork filed for bankruptcy, Adam Neumann had already moved on. In August 2022, while WeWork was still limping toward collapse, he announced his new company, Flow. The concept, residential rental real estate, owning apartment buildings, giving tenants a sense of community. The WeWork model applied to where people live instead of where they work. Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz wrote the largest single check his firm had ever written to a seed-stage startup, $350 million. His public statement: "We believe Adam is a visionary leader who revolutionized the future of work, and we think he can do the same for living." The same investors who watched WeWork burn handed the architect of that collapse more than $1/3 billion to try again. In April 2025, Flow raised another $100 million at a $2.5 billion valuation. In October 2024, Neumann launched Workflow, co-working spaces inside Flow apartment buildings. He is functionally rebuilding WeWork inside residential buildings, with the same investor 3 years after bankruptcy. He is what those investors understood that most people missed. Neumann did not fail because he lacked a vision. WeWork failed because the company could not support the valuation his vision demanded. The vision itself, shared space, community infrastructure, the future of how people live and work, was still intact. The residential rental market in the United States is worth approximately $4.5 trillion. No dominant platform has yet done to apartment rentals what Airbnb did to hotels or WeWork did to offices. That is the gap Neumann is targeting. The risk is the pattern: mission-driven language, massive early valuation, charismatic single founder, investors buying the story before the model is proven. The question Wall Street is asking about Flow is the same question it failed to ask loudly enough in 2019. What is this actually worth? Without the story, he burned $47 billion of other people's money. SoftBank lost $14 billion of it. Neumann walked away with $1.7 billion. Started again. Tried to buy his old company back at a discount. Got blocked. Raised $350 million anyway. That is not a mistake. That is a system. A system that rewards the founder's mythology over the company's fundamentals. A system where the story of what something could be is worth more, at least temporarily, than the reality of what it is. That system built WeWork. That system destroyed it. And that system is now funding Flow. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Neumann has learned his lesson, or is Flow just WeWork with better branding? Because I genuinely cannot decide. Subscribe to Stag Research if you want to keep digging into stories like this. The hidden systems that shape the world we live in.